right, well, to get us started, panelists, I wonder if you would just introduce yourselves, maybe tell us, your name, maybe tell us when you graduated, how long you've been out of Granite, if you're still in high school, or where you are in life. And then tell us a little bit, just maybe a sentence or two about why you wanted to be here this evening.
I'm Gabriel Rodienko, and I technically graduated last year. Technically not, though, because I'm still here. Basically, it's a long, drawn-out story. I'm still catching up on high school credits, and I'm still taking classes at Granite, but I'm also teaching classes at Granite, so I'm in kind of a unique position between the student body and the teachers. I'm 17. I currently work at Chick-fil-A Alumni, and I am aspiring to be a writer, which I can thank Granite for, actually. And as far as why I wanted to be here tonight, the most important thing to me in general in life is to have a solid community backing you, and to have friends and people you can go to in the good times or the bad times. And I feel like with the number of families who are pulling their children out of Granite immediately going into high school, you're kind of losing that sense of community. And so it's very important for me that the future graduating classes of Granite have more people, have more of a strong community, and that we're able to bolster the number of people in Granite in general. So that's why I'm here tonight.
Hello, my name is Susanna Abler, and I graduated from Granite last year. So currently I'm a freshman at UMBC, and I'm studying art. I think one of the things that Granite specifically has really taught me, and one of the reasons I really wanted to be here, is because they emphasize a lot of things about developing your worldview and really kind of strengthening your own opinions on things, whether that be usually in a Christian sense, but really discovering who you are and what you believe and having a firm foundation in that. And I think that's a really important thing to bring into college life and also into the workplace.
Hi, I'm Candace Abler. I'm a junior right now at University of Maryland down in College Park. I'm majoring in chemistry, German, and I'm also in the Air Force ROTC program there. The reason that I'm here today is because I feel that with Granite, I got a little bit more of a head start in figuring out college work, and the fact that I had to figure out my home assignment sheets for myself. I had to basically push myself and do the work myself instead of a teacher saying, here, this is what you need to have done, do this. I was the one who was doing it myself. Self-motivation, I guess you could call it. And that was probably the biggest skill Granite taught me, and that was definitely more in the high school years. So I'm here hoping to let you all see that.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Katrina Morton, and I graduated from Granite in 2015. That means I'm a junior at St. Mary's College of Maryland right now. I'm a biology major, education minor, hoping to teach in middle school science one day. And one of the reasons why I'm here today and why I see it as such a value and importance to share my high school experience with you is that even in the short time I've been at college, I've seen my peers around me struggling with not knowing exactly how to think critically and wanting to. And I've come to my liberal arts public college ready to have those skills, like ready and honed through all the debating things we've done. And I've really seen that critical thinking as something of importance and deep value in my experience at St. Mary's.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Caleb Morton. I graduated last year. I'm a freshman at Grove City College. And really the reason I wanted to come here today was because at the beginning of the year, talking to people at Grove City, I saw this huge disconnect between people's education in high school, specifically in public schools and even in a lot of private schools, and that preparation for college. So this was true for a lot of freshmen, but also I heard this a lot through juniors and seniors where they said, like, my high school education, the primary thing that it taught me was chemistry for my chemistry degree. And all that I had was a little bit of chemistry to move forward. And I found that astonishingly sad, considering the huge background that Granite had given me on how to learn, how to think critically, how to develop my own worldview, and a huge work ethic that a lot of my peers had to generate themselves. So there's more that goes into that. There are far more characteristics that Granite imbued me with that I can't get into quite now because it'd take a long time. But yeah, that huge disconnect between education that the general person at Grove City received and what I received. And when I see students being taken out of Granite right before high school in that truly formative time, in the when the work starts to build up and when you start building a lot of those traits, that became something that I really wanted to address in this community.
Hi, I'm gonna sit since I'm behind this. My name is Julie Myers. I graduated from Granite in 2011, and then I graduated from Philadelphia University in 2015, and I studied interactive design and media, and I worked at a web design company for 3 years, and now I just recently started working for a technology company called MindGrub, and we do like websites, apps, robotics, VR, that kind of stuff, so I'm a project manager now.
All right, I thought I'd start with kind of a practical question. One of the things when facing high school that parents and students think about is how am I going to fulfill all of my classes and all the things I need to do. Granite provides a lot of that, but I'm betting that all of you got some of your education from going out and finding it elsewhere. So where are some of the places you went? What are some of the things you did to fulfill some of those academic or even arts related, music, whatever kind of things that you wanted to pursue in high school?
I took a few classes at the community college in language. So I took Spanish 201, 102 through 202 at HCC, and my family was also part of Homesteaders or Radius, and so I took some science. I took physics there, and I took statistics there to fill those science and math credits that Granite doesn't supply. But Granite does supply all of your English and history needs, so that in itself is fully covered.
So my sister and I both did a lot of music. Thanks, Mom. So we did a lot of music, and we actually went to a private school and did marching band as an extracurricular activity because they let homeschoolers join their marching band, and that was a great experience. I did that for 3 years, and that's probably one of the coolest things that I got to do.
One thing I'd add on to that is just be creative. I did take physics. And my grandfather was a mechanical engineer in the Navy, then Boeing, then Rockwell. And so I just had my physics textbook and I worked through it with him. And anything I didn't understand, he could pretty easily explain, as I'm sure you're truly shocked by that job description I just gave him. But it's pretty easy to figure out most of the classes, and when you can't, improvise, and you can get it done.
Yeah, I mean, I know you were just adding on to what she said, but to add on to what he said, I really have not had to stray too far from Granite to complete all of my credits. There was one summer where I took a technology credit online, but aside from that, as far as languages, I'm actually finishing up my language credit this year with Latin 3, and it's not part of the core curriculum, because the core curriculum is heavily based in English and grammar and logic and rhetoric and history and all of that being classical and such, but we have plenty of extracurriculars. I've gone through biology, advanced biology, chemistry. I've taken algebra through trigonometry with Mrs. Evans. Bless her heart for having to deal with me. But yeah, honestly, it's not that hard to get all of your high school credits out of the way here. You just have to stray a little bit from the beaten path. Not too much, though.
And if you're looking for arts credits specifically, occasionally Granite will have options available where they will teach art classes, and even if it's like an art class for younger students, you can sometimes, I was in an art class that was specifically for the younger grades, and I was the only junior or senior in that class, but the teacher was very willing to work with me and give me my own separate projects to kind of advance my own thinking skills in terms of art. And there's a lot of, there's a specific high school that I went to as well, a public school. I think it's out in Frederick. It was a little ways out, but they often offer drawing classes. It was Carroll County? It was, there's occasionally other schools that will work with students and let people from the outside come in to work with their art programs. But you can also look at colleges. I got to do a college program for like a few weeks in the summer with Micah, and that was really great, and that was kind of a blessing. So, Micah is the Maryland Institute College of Art, which is a very good art school. So that was really great. But there's a lot of options outside of Granite for art if your child is looking into that.
Yeah, similarly to you're Gabe, right? Yeah, I did not stray from Granite at all. Actually, I know it's been a while, so I'm not sure what options are offered now. But at the time, my dad was teaching all the advanced math as an option, and I was taking the musical theater as an option too. And I'm pretty sure my tech credit was, because my interests were technology related, my senior thesis was actually a web development project, so I could count that as a tech credit, because at that point I didn't need any more like writing or history credits. So some people who did a lot of papers or a big project like that for their senior thesis use their credits for that, but I use my credits for technology, so it's pretty flexible. Yeah.
Okay, what about outside of academics? What kinds of extracurriculars, hobbies, passions, what sort of things were you pursuing? Sports, music, arts, crafts, hobbies, and how did that tie in with the homeschooling piece? Do you think you had, was it good to be homeschooled and pursuing what you were pursuing? Was it difficult? Would you have had those same opportunities in another school setting?
I will start. So I took guitar lessons down the street, and I could walk to it, and during the evenings they were always booked up, so I was able to go during the school day and just kind of take a break, go take my guitar lesson and come back, which was great. Similarly, I worked at Panera, so I would do a couple of shifts during the workday when most kids were at school as well, so it was the flexibility to allow me to kind of learn about making money and saving money and pursuing interests without having to work around the schedule that most school kids have. And then I played ultimate frisbee on the weekends and stuff, so I was pretty active social.
I don't know if this really falls under the category you were planning on going into, but I worked at Racktop Systems, actually, with your dad.
My father.
And so working there, the only way I could make my schedule work was to be homeschooled. There was no way I could work at a company where everyone goes home at 6 o'clock if I were in a public school setting. And so I did software testing there, and I was able to make my schedule flexible in a way that I could come in for 5 hours from 6 o'clock in the morning to later in the day, and then, because I'm tired and I can't do math, and I just had a final yesterday. And so, I could have my schedule flexible like that, or I could even work 10 hours on Friday and then have all my work done on Thursday. So I was able to actually maintain that job and get a lot of work experience through having that flexible homeschool schedule that I would not have been able to do in any other way.
So throughout high school, I was able to, the extracurriculars that I was really a part of were cheerleading through the Elevate program that's here, and babysitting at all times and all hours of the day. I can tell you that moms with younger children love having babysitters who can come in like around lunchtime so they can go out to shop and get groceries without the kids. Like, I did that a lot. There's also Bible study here that I provided childcare for. It was an early morning Bible study, and so I would watch all the kids so the moms could have that Bible study without the distraction of their little ones who were not yet school age. I was also able to take up the opportunity to start teaching on my own, and now as I'm an education minor, it's really served me well. I was able to teach through the Radius homeschooling and Spokes group. I first started with a puppets class and then an American Girls class, and I taught at least 5 or 6 various classes throughout the way, and those classes all happen on a Friday afternoon when I would have been in school. So I got to have that hands-on teaching opportunity that really was part of getting me to where I am now with having that passion for teaching. And so even developing those passions, like my brother told, he had the computer passion, I have the teaching passion. We're both able to pursue those and hone those. And now, as we're in college, we're able to much more understand what we want to do with our lives because we're able to have that flexibility in our schedules.
I'm not quite as far along in their self-development. Not quite as far along as they are. I just got to experiment. I'm slowly finding my path now, but I got to experiment with a whole bunch of different things in high school that I don't think I would have been able to do otherwise. I took multiple different languages, did marching band. What else, Susanna? What else did I do?
Team Pact homeschool specific?
Yes,
Yes.
that's homeschool specific.
That's a whole week.
So got to do stuff called Team Pact, which is an organization that is out there to teach specifically homeschool kids about government. So you go to whatever your state capital is, you learn how your state government is run, and
you're there for a week.
yeah, it's a week-long class. It's a lot of fun. You learn so much. The discussions you have, the people you meet. That was an amazing experience. Thank you for reminding me about that. But I just got to experiment with a whole bunch of different things. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think I did a lot. That's just me. I did marching band, which is technically not a unique experience to homeschooling. But specifically where I got to go with, we went to AACS to do marching band. It was a private school, and not a lot of private schools have marching bands. But it was like specifically a Christian organization, so they always put forward a Christian message, and it was really great to be a part of that. Team Pact was another one. Another thing. Oh, I also got to teach at Radius. I taught a elementary art class for elementary students and teaching them how to draw and how to see things and how to put what they see on paper in a way that maybe they weren't thinking about before. And that was a very unique opportunity that I really, really enjoyed getting to be a part of, because that was a new experience, and I don't know if I would have had that opportunity outside of having like the flexible homeschooling options.
So as far as hobbies for me, I guess like Susanna, I kind of drew a blank on this one. I don't do much. I play my ukulele and I write. And that's actually, Granite for me specifically was actually a perfect fit in that regard, because once you get into like 9th grade, 10th grade, everything from there, it's a lot of writing. And so if your child is in any way into literature or English, anything, history even, they're going to have a good time in the high school program, because it's a lot of research, a lot of writing, a lot of citations. And so basically in that way I got to mix work and play, because I had my hobby in my work. And but I guess a thing with Granite specifically, and homeschooling in general, is that it taught me a lot of self-discipline in my hobbies, because I got to work on time management and stuff. I get to balance, this is when I want to have this is when I get to write for fun, this is when I need to actually do my work. And for a lot of people going into college and stuff directly from public school, they've gone from, okay, here's the schedule, I have to follow this, I have to do this tonight because it's due immediately tomorrow, being thrown into a place where it's like, you have a couple days to do this, or this project comes in a couple weeks, you get to live your life how you want because you're an adult now. It may be a little bit problematic for them because they've not learned like proper self-discipline. And so the whole self-discipline aspect is definitely another major advantage of homeschooling. I would say definitely work with your child on that a lot, because, and I love my parents, they trusted me to do it by myself, and I'm not the most self-disciplined person, so definitely work with your child on that.
Communication is
Yeah,
key.
communication is key.
One thing to build on what Gabe said about there being a lot of writing, that is absolutely true. There is a lot of writing.
But the thing is, that's not something that's just here. When you go to college,
Right,
all of
that's
that
what
stuff
I
is going to
was-
be
Yeah.
expected to do.
Right, that's what I was about to say. Like when I'm at college and teacher assigns a 5-page paper and it's due in a week. My classmates are freaking out because only a week to write a 5-page paper. After Granite through high school, I can write a 5-page paper in an hour. Research in 30 minutes, citations in 10, and writing the paper in an hour. So just having that background and having all that extra time that they don't have because they literally spend like 10 or 12 hours writing that 5-page paper, it's very freeing. And it's very empowering to be able to just write a paper in an hour and not worry about it at all.
I think you bring up a good point too, because I hate writing. I mean, like, classical education is great as a model across the board, and I think coming out of Granite, like, I had this crisis every year of like, oh my gosh, do I want to go back? And I would always think about it, and then I would always want to come back because even though the core curriculum is heavy in things that were opposite of my interests, there's so much more about Granite and about homeschooling that really prepared me for success and made me realize that even if I don't like writing a paper, you know, the flexibility of the schedule allows me to pursue my interests on my own time. The community is so solid and the character building and friendships are so concrete. I mean, I really came back for the people, and because I feel like when you grow up in a Christian household and in like a Granite environment where you're being taught by people who are modeling, you know, lifestyles that you see yourself wanting to pursue as an adult, and you trust and respect them. At the end of the day, I was like, all right, I don't like omnibus, but I love the teacher who's going to teach me. I know I need the skill set, and I know I have the flexibility to pursue what I want to do on the side. So it's tough because I feel like a Granite high school education is very rigorous, and the core curriculum, it does not align with every student's like passions and interests, but I still, on the end of it, wouldn't have changed anything because, I mean, it's what you were saying. You can go into any college classroom and you know how to think critically, you know how to speak well, and you know how to write well. And so assignments, I mean, literally the entire first year of college is a breeze because it's stuff that you did in 9th and 10th grade at Granite, whereas these kids are doing it for the first time. And so I think it puts you in a position to excel in college, and yeah, I mean, that's a whole side note, but I don't know if you want us all to answer every question because I feel like we're going to run out of time.
Speak up whenever you feel like you have something to say, so this is great. Okay, one of the questions that I'm sure you all have heard before is, you know, what about socialization, right? Did you have a social life as a homeschooler? How did that work? Where did you find friends?
Like, we're all rolling our eyes because it's the stupidest question, but it's the question that you get at every moment. I cannot tell you how many times in my career people have said, like, oh, you're from Howard County, you know, where'd you go to high school? And I'm like, oh, I was homeschooled. And they were like, oh my God, I've never met a homeschooler like you before. It's not normal. Because, like, but we all know that we're all normal. So, I mean, there's an endless opportunity for social interaction. I mean, it would have been harder if I was at home and not in a co-op or in something like Granite, but I mean, I think having the right parents says a lot about it. Like, my parents are well-rounded social individuals who can give me a worldview that is a good one and teach me how to talk to people. But no, I mean, we all had jobs, we all were in classroom settings, we all had friends that we hung out with outside of school. Like, it's really just a non-issue.
Right. Also, one thing that I did find is I preferred having a couple really close friends than like 500 Facebook friends who you barely know, and you have a lot of skin deep relationships. But like my best friends in high school, we had been really close for 8 and 11 years respectively. So just having that huge bedrock of a friendship was really incredible, and I really think I had much stronger social interactions and friendships coming out of high school that I've been maintaining far more in college than all my other friends who were in private school or public school, because they just had so many friends and it wasn't as tight of friendships. It was many more friendships, obviously, but it wasn't the tight bonds that you end up growing when you don't have the massive numbers.
Well, and because your education here is so much about the pursuit of excellence that you're surrounded by quality people. So
That has a lot
like
to
it's
do with it, too.
possible to have a friendship that's that much deeper with somebody who you're taking this class with and learning, worldview.
Right.
More so than just like your random science lab buddy.
I can't speak for
Unless it's
exactly
kind of
like
Morton's science lab.
I can't speak for exactly like what is in public schools in terms of that, but I do think that a lot of what creates strong friendships here is the fact that like you have to discuss your opinion and your feelings about things, and you can't really like hide yourself to an extent, because a lot of our discussions in high school have to do with like very difficult topics or like very sensitive topics, so you have to be it develops sort of like your ability to speak about things that may be difficult, and talk about those things with other people really deepens your relationships. But also if you're doing things like outside of Granite, like we did marching band, and I'm still very good friends with a lot of people in that marching band, then you're gonna you can find ways to socialize. And like especially if you are like I'd say a majority of homeschoolers, and probably specifically people at Granite, they are Christian. You got a church, they probably get socialized there. One of the weirdest compliments I get at school is like, wow, you're not like a normal homeschooler. I would think you're a
All the
homeschooler.
time.
Like,
All the time.
You're really well adjusted for a homeschooler. You'll hear that a lot.
You will.
it's a very odd statement. I don't understand it, but okay.
Well, see, the thing is, like, the homeschoolers that everyone notices are like the one in 100, the 1 in 1,000 that really didn't get the
Should we
socialization.
expect you to leave homeschooling as like specifically like a radicalized individual who like will literally hate anyone who is not a Christian? Which that's something we kind of learned, is to just talk about like dissenting opinions, which is maybe something not as good people are as good at today, is having dissenting opinions and being civil about it. But
And I'm going to go out there and look at this from the other perspective. As someone who's going to a public college, there's a lot of people there who maybe got socialization that's very different than mine, and sometimes they'll be talking about things and I'll catch on and like, yeah, I don't really actually want to know anything about that. I'm just going to leave myself from that situation, whether it's about the parties or the sex or the drugs that's going on campus. I don't want to know about that. I don't want to be involved. I have no interest. And do I mind that I had a naive, innocent, guarded high school? I'm actually quite thankful.
Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing your thoughts on that one. So this kind of goes along with that, but obviously being homeschooled is different than being in, like, for instance, a public or private school classroom setting day in and day out. Was there anything in your high school experience that you feel like you missed out on from being homeschooled, or do you feel like you had a pretty well-rounded experience? Is it comparable? Any thoughts on that?
At the time, I was real bummed about prom, but I hear that I had nothing to be bummed about. My understanding now is better off not to experience that. But literally, that's the only thing that comes to mind. And it's like a dumb, inconsequential thing. So, no, I definitely feel like it was a well-rounded experience.
I guess the main issue I've had in my last couple of years of Granite, and it's really no fault of Granite itself, is that a lot of my friends just up and left Granite, and so I was kind of left feeling like a fish out of water, I guess. Some background. My 8th grade year, there were 12 of us, there were 6 of us in the class. My 9th, there were 3. And then going into my sophomore year, I was the only one who came back to the class. And so Granite decided to just bump me up to Susanna and Caleb's grade. And so I guess that's really the only thing I feel like I've missed out on. I feel like I've missed out on having, my friends who I grew up with and came up with see Granite to the end with me, basically, and graduate with me and stuff. And not that I didn't love graduating with you guys. I love you guys, but yeah, it's no fault of Granite, but that's the main issue I've had, is I felt like I've had a lack of community.
Yeah, we were just on the topic of socialization. That is one thing that tends to be different about homeschooling and about Granite specifically, is you have very fluctuating classes and class dynamics, and I guess in high school it's also different because you have like very large classes and they're split up in public schools, so you might not like know everyone in your graduating class, but a lot of those people you might like go through elementary school through high school with, and you're with them for a long time, but you don't always get that specifically at Granite. And our classes tend to be very small, which is great because you get a very close relationship with your entire class, but sometimes just the fact that we only are there 2 times a week and a lot of us live very far away, we don't always see each other as often, which can kind of be sad, but you know, it also forces us to like get out of the house more and actually see each other, so we're not as shut-in homeschoolers as we claim not to be. But there is like the only seeing each other 2 times a week that can be a little sad or rough.
As a biology major, there have been a few people who have come into my classes with me who had certain pipetting techniques or certain other lab experiences that I didn't have in high school, but that hasn't been anything that's been setting me back, right? The professors are there's always new instruments, and the colleges always have much better instrumentation than the high schools anyway, so it's one thing to be able to go into a college classroom and be like understand what the materials and tools are and be ready to learn and use, and in some ways I got to come being like, teach me, I want to learn this stuff, and other people came and like, I know how to do, nope, don't know how to do that anymore. How do you use this kind of pipette? How do you set it? So I think that's a fun fact, but it didn't set me back in any way from my classes that I'm taking now in college.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I don't feel like I was set back in any way in particular, but I do feel like I was set ahead. The self-discipline that Gabe was talking about, and I was trying to talk about in my introduction, but messed up royally. That self-discipline of coming into class in college, writing notes about, all right, this is due this time, this is due this time. They actually give it to you in a syllabus. They hand you the entire schedule, and then there's people freaking out last minute because, oh, I forgot that this paper is due in 2 days. Having the experience of doing that for yourself still in high school definitely puts you ahead, and I'm really glad I had that because a lot of people don't have those skills and they're trying to develop them. Like even some members of my class that I've gotten to know really well still have trouble figuring themselves out and their due dates and whatnot. So I don't feel like I was hindered in any way, but I definitely feel like I was given a step forward.
Along that note, I definitely was given many steps forward in the sense, well, I'm a computer science major, as a little bit of background. So for my senior thesis, I was able to do a very technical topic where I got to do a lot of computer science research and a little bit of programming. But the one thing I really did feel like I was missing that some of my friends at college did have was an actual programming class. I never took them outside of Granite because I always taught myself a lot of things. And there were just some little things that I ended up missing, basic functions and languages that I never used because I never needed them in what I was doing. Just because I self-taught myself everything, there were some things that I missed. There were some things that I learned far better than everyone else. But there is kind of a give and take there with a little bit of a lack of a programming side. But of course, those things can be found in community college or do homesteaders have programming classes? I don't think so.
Probably not.
Probably
No.
not.
on it.
Okay, cool.
Could start one.
Next year.
So yeah, that's really the only thing that I could think of that I was missing in any way.
Okay, awesome. Well, you guys have mentioned college a lot. So what was it like applying to college as a homeschooler? How did that go?
Okay, I think I probably applied to the most colleges out of any of us. 8? 7? How many? Okay, never mind. You probably have more to talk about. I applied to a really hard college to get into. So I applied to the Air Force Academy, and that was a time and a half. but the process, even for a huge school like that where it's super difficult to get into and you have to jump through so many hoops, the process wasn't any different for me than any other student. The only thing I had to do, which my mom did, was create a transcript just saying these are the credits I've taken. I've actually officially completed high school. It's signed by the county. That's the only thing I had to do. Everything else was the same. The paragraphs I had to write, the forms I had to sign, everything was all the same. The only thing is that we actually had to send the transcript instead of the school. That was the only difference that I found.
Yeah, so in my college search, I kind of went for really broad, and I found that some colleges have you write a lot and answer like 20 essay questions, which is really annoying, but not that much work anyway. But it's annoying. But some just have you write, this was the hardest one, respond to a C.S. Lewis quote in 100 words.
You're like, only 100?
Exactly. The 100 words part was the most difficult thing. I literally spent like an hour and a half trying to figure out how to condense everything into 100 words. That was Grove City, by the way. But I applied to a whole range of schools, including MIT, which I decided I didn't want to go to, but then looked at my email that I used for that like 3 months ago, something like that. No, 2 months ago. And it turns out I actually got in. So, yeah, Granite prepares you well enough that you can get into MIT.
Yeah.
So, there you go.
Writing the Common App essay was more or less trying to the big thing was just trying to figure out what category you best fit into for the Common App questions and like what can I write about that is interesting. But there's classes at like Radius, I don't know, in Granite, we actually had an entire period of like the first year of senior year that was just dedicated to applying to colleges, writing Common App essays and like discussing them and working on that. So that was kind of nice, just having a dedicated time to be like work on college applications. But the writing is easy. There's specific colleges that'll sometimes require like a lot of extra stuff if you're homeschooled. Like I had one college I applied to which needed transcripts, proof of lab. I needed like a signed letter from the Howard County School Board to be like, yes, this person did in fact get an education. They're not lying. There's a few things that I think I like looked around for, like I didn't know what to do because it was something specifically that like usually the school will put in like transcripts, and there's a few other things, but like college applications it's more just the sitting down and doing them. And if you use the Common App and you just apply to schools with the Common App, it's pretty easy because then you just continue to hit the same button over and over and over again and do like a few specific things for the various colleges.
So, gosh, it's been so long, I think I blocked that time out. Applying to colleges, like honestly, admissions counselors are angels they walk among us, and they're great. And having done a lot of, higher ed websites in my career, actually, almost every college has an admissions counselor that specializes in homeschooling families. And so it's not, I think the most difficult, or the most difference is you don't have a guidance counselor necessarily, so you have to be self-guided in your research. But there's so many tools like College Board that make it so easy to be like, here are my interests, and I want this and this. And then they'll just be like, here's your potential schools. You call up the admissions counselors, and they really walk you through it. So, all the entrance exams and tests and things, like my SAT scores were good, and writing essays was so easy. So it really wasn't bad at all. I think the hardest thing was just choosing between colleges, because I got accepted to like every college I applied to because my education was so much more rigorous than like most of my counterparts who didn't go to Granite. So my only challenge was I was applying for graphic design programs, so I didn't have a portfolio because I hadn't taken any art or tech classes at Granite. But in hindsight, if I had known I wanted to do that earlier, I could have taken classes that would have provided me with a portfolio. So I was limited in that I couldn't apply for some, like MICA, that is like an actual art school where they absolutely won't accept you without a portfolio. I couldn't apply to that school, but I got into like Virginia Tech and like I don't even remember, a bunch of schools that I didn't want to go to, but.
On the portfolio thing, Micah, I think specifically has a day that you can register for with a portfolio review day. So if you have a student who's going into the arts, they will, like, you can, sophomore or junior year, you can have them start compiling stuff and they will let you know, like, hey, you need to work on this, or don't include, like, one of the things they told me was, don't include basic images of eyes because we get 1 million of those and they're not as artsy as you think they are. So, like, you can go, there's a lot of colleges in Maryland specifically that will do portfolio reviews for your students.
Another thing, here at Granite, you know your fellow students and your professors well. So when you go to have those teacher recommendations, your teachers can very easily write you those recommendations. And I'd say the only catch to recommendations is when they ask you for your school counselor to write you a recommendation, because we don't have a school counselor the same way most public schools do. So you, right, in some ways all of them are, and in other ways none of them are, right? It's a unique role that, as far as I know, isn't currently being filled. So you have your mom write it, or have another part of the Granite board write it.
If you need teacher recommendations, Dolly Myers is the best.
So true.
Vouch for your character.
Literally.
She's written a lot.
Okay, story about that. I was really dumb, and I didn't apply to this one school until like the day of the deadline, and I needed a recommendation. I was like, hey, Mrs. Myers, can you give me a teacher recommendation in like 3 hours? And she was like, yeah, sure, Caleb. 15 minutes later, it was in.
And perfect.
And perfect.
So good.
All right, so at Granite and in classical education, we talk a lot about education being formative. And so looking back on your high school experience, what were some of the most formative moments? You know, how did being homeschooled or being at Granite, or both, you know, play a role in forming your personality, your interests, your beliefs, your worldview?
So I'd probably say one of the earlier formative experiences would be my first debate in 7th grade. Probably the first time the fear of God was just pushed upon me and inside me entirely. And I mean, it was the first time I really had to deal with, oh, here's a lot of stress, and you also have to do a lot of things right now under this stress. And slowly but surely it got easier. And so that was a very formative thing. I'm still not great at dealing with stress, but I would be a lot worse if not for Granite, because it teaches you how to work well under pressure and work well alone. I'd say I can't really think of any other distinct formative moments. I feel like just the entirety of the logic program was just one big formative moment. I would not be the person I am today without Granite's logic program. I would not be able to think critically. I'd not be able to write as well. I wouldn't be able to speak the way I'm speaking now. I know it's not great, but it would be a whole lot worse without Granite. So, yeah.
To go off of that, I think a lot of us can agree and attest to the fact that the logic stage and the rhetoric stage of Granite have really shaped us. And I can tell you that the first debate in 7th grade shaped me in a different way than it shaped Gabe. I found that as I went through the public policy debates and then the values debates, the Lincoln Douglas debates, and then the mock trial, I learned a lot about research and finding one article that says one thing and then immediately thinking, oh, well, this and this and this and this directly contradict this, so clearly the article is no good, right? Or even in debates, like I have that critical thought and that background ready to go, and I love that. I absolutely love that. And I think in some ways mock trial was a really good finale to that. You do mock trial in 12th grade, and you're given the exact same information. So like, right, with the previous debates, you can be totally stumped by an opponent who says, well, here's a fact, and you're like, I didn't know that fact. Now what? But in the mock trial, you're literally handed all of the information you have on the case, and you have to base your entire case based on these points or based on these points. And that's what you emphasize and you draw out from your witnesses as you prepare your witnesses for their acting. But as you prepare your witnesses for this case, you show them like this is what we really need to get across because this is the whole premise of our argument. Because of this law and this is what happened, this needs to be the final verdict. And I think being able to even go through that experience of having that mock trial and those other debates, that you're able to be put in situations where you think critically right away. And I love that. And to this day, I love deep conversations, and I love conversations. Like, some of my favorite conversations ever are when I'm talking with someone who doesn't know who God is and is telling me things from their worldview that are directly contradicting the Bible. And what I say is, okay, I want to hear your worldview, I want to understand it, and I still respect you as a person, and you still have human dignity and worth, and I want to show you that. And as I show you that, I'm also going to tell you the truth. And so here's the truth. And here's what I know to be true, and here's where it says it in the Bible, and here's how I've seen it in my life. And we get to talk and exchange, and those are my favorite conversations ever. Ever.
I definitely like talking to people that think differently than I do, and I'm surrounded by them. And one of the things that I definitely love best is that in our debates, we didn't just have to argue one side of the issue. We had to be able to argue both sides and do it well for both sides. Because when you understand what you believe, that's one thing. But when you understand what someone else is thinking and understand how they're seeing the issue through what kind of lens, that lens of truth, what kind of lens they're looking at the world through and why they're thinking these things and why they think this set of things is good while this set of people thinks these things are bad. Figuring out what you think on it when you know both sides is a lot easier, and you're not misinformed about doing it either. So that was something that Granite definitely taught me, is to look at both sides, figure out what both sides are thinking, or multiple sides. There's usually more than just two sides to an issue. Figure out what's going on, then form your own opinion, and then debate not using your own opinion and doing the two sides.
That's why I loved, after debates, I would always love going up to my classmates and saying, all right, so actually, what do you really believe? Like,
And then we just gathered for about 20 minutes.
now that we've debated
Always
this.
discuss the debates afterwards.
Yeah, it's so good.
For me personally, I think specifically like 11th and 12th grade, like rhetoric and omnibus classes were like really formative for me because we read a lot of specific literature that had to do with like controversial topics or things that were at one point an issue, like Fahrenheit 451 has to do with censorship and what censorship means to us and like what we think should be done about that and different things. And also like that's when you really get into like public speaking, and I'm not really a big public speaker. I don't really do that. I'm not very good at it, especially right off the top of my head. I can write a speech and I can read that speech, but when you get into like, hey, you're gonna do a speech purely based off an outline, or you're going to memorize the speech and you're going to give it off the top of your head, or you have to create one in the moment. It's a very different experience. And I think another thing that I've, I guess, kind of recently developed, but Granite has taught me, is in the realm of thinking. I have learned to think before I speak, which is a very new thing, but I have a lot of my friends at school right now have said you give a vibe of being very wise, because I wait until when we're having a discussion about anything sensitive or political or really any discussion about anything, I wait until I'm really sure about my opinion about something, or like that I know what I'm going to say or what I'm talking about before I say it. So when I give my opinion, my very rare opinion, it sounds well thought out and I know what I'm talking about because I've thought about it. So Granite does a good job of teaching you how to think about things, and that was important.
So going back to formative moments, there are a couple that really stand out for me. One of which is Mrs. Meyer's 10th grade omnibus class. Yeah, you guys know what's up. Really, I feel like I hope none of my other English teachers before this were in that class in here. But I feel like a lot of my other, all my other English classes really prepared me for the massive brain dump they all got me to that point that I was ready for that huge brain dump of information. I learned how to write so much better in that class, and it grew me to such a degree. It was astonishing. And then also, I think we can all agree, senior thesis.
Good time.
Yeah, good time. After doing 7-8 months of research on something, it really gives you a perspective on a lot of things. From this is what work in the actual world would look like when you're spending more than a week on a project, when you're spending 8 months on one thing and coming to actual conclusions and coming to things that other people may have not come to before, and arguing something from your own perspective. And it gives you the ability and the challenge of doing something new instead of just, this is what other people have said. I agree with them, and I'm going to restate that in my own way. I'm coming up with my own arguments and coming to my own conclusions that maybe nobody else agrees with, depending on your topic. So that was really influential for me, just having that new experience.
Yeah, gosh, high school really is formative years, and I think it is more formative than you realize when you're in high school, because you think you have your life put together and you don't, and then the same thing happens in college and the same thing happens in your 20s, and we're always doing that our whole lives. But high school really is, the time where you're changing from a kid and you're, going to become an adult, theoretically, some earlier than others, really. But the thing is, for me, of course the education is formative. Personally, the curriculum has shaped up so much since the time I was there. It really was run by completely different people at the time, and so it was a lot looser then. So I wish I could speak more about the actual curriculum and the classes being formative for like my skills. But for me, I asked my husband, I am a feeler. I am not a critical thinker by nature. And so I needed structure, and I needed to be taught by people who were investing not just in my education, but in me as a human being. And I didn't know that at the time. Like, I wanted to go to school and go to prom and like study art and be like, but I didn't know. I knew in the back of my mind that I liked the people and I liked the environment, and I needed that, but I didn't know why I needed it. But looking back, it's a wholesome environment and it's a challenging environment. And so you're not just learning facts and you're not just learning skills, you're learning worldview. And so I think it really challenged me to think about who I want to be as a person and what kind of people I want to associate and how to have a conversation with all kinds of different people. And, it's hugely formative. And even for somebody like me who didn't really love the day-to-day aspect of the subjects that I was taking, I loved the people that I was taking it with, and I respected the people that I was taking it from. And so it just really entirely shapes a worldview that's solid, on solid ground and moving in solid directions. I just feel like leaps and bounds. I needed that, and I didn't even know at the time how much I needed it, but it's so crucial.
One short story about making that foundation of a worldview. In one of our high school classes, one of our first assignments of the year was to read about a variety of different theories about how God made creation to make the world. And at the end of all these different theories, the exact 7-day theory, the time over thousands of years theory, all these different ideas that these great minds had, we had to write an essay about what we thought it was. And even in the very beginning of that high school class, we were expected to take these different ideas that we were told, and this wise mind said this, and this wise mind contradicted that by saying this. Are you coming up with your own thing, or are you sticking with one of them? What convinces you and why?
Now that you're out of high school, you're in college, you're in the workplace, what kind of skills do you see yourself exercising that you can trace back to being homeschooled, maybe Granite specifically? Any thoughts on that?
Ability to communicate, definitely. Isn't part of there's something somewhere in the Granite curriculum. The purpose of this education is to teach you to express yourself winsomely and what's the phrasing on that?
Winsomely and probably elegantly.
Yeah, I've or maybe eloquently. I'm not entirely sure, but I've definitely felt like I'm able to do that. Like even like I work fast food. I work at Chick-fil-A, and I find it a lot easier to communicate with my coworkers and guests and managers and such just from being here. It's not even really I have to think, okay, I better turn on my logical homeschooler brain right now and talk to this person. It's just second nature at this point. So
I think the biggest skill, and I don't think this was necessarily just from Granite, but I think the biggest skill that I took from being in this environment is not just knowing what you think, but why you think it, and being able to speak to that when somebody, I mean, really, whether it's an opinion or a fact because you have knowledge about it, just being able to portray your worldview in a way that's could influence another person. Not that you're out trying to change everyone's mind all the time, but I mean, I just remember some of these conversations would just be like novel, and I'm like, I'm bored by this conversation. Like, I would rather have a deeper conversation, but at the same time, like having the ability to relate to another person on a more critical level, I think is a social skill. And then as far as like hard skills, I mean, like you're just leagues above in the like writing and speaking portion, and it makes general education classes a breeze.
I think to some extent, being proactive was a skill I developed. I think that was probably enhanced by constantly having my mom around telling me I needed to do things. But a lot of homeschooling is you have to develop a work ethic. You have to do things yourself. You have to go out and look for these opportunities. You have to go out and look for scholarships or for schools. You have to go out and like look for things and do things yourself. So like I had a job over the summer and over the school year last year where I worked at Starbucks, and a lot of that is you have to take initiative with things. Like you have to decide to do something. And I think one of the reasons I got a job and why hopefully my employer liked me a lot and was upset when I had to leave was because I was proactive and I would do things. I would ask what needs to be done. Is there something I can do? Because I am used to having to do things, and I think that's definitely something that homeschooling specifically gave me.
Yeah, that drive to get things done and make sure you have your schedule up and ready, so you're not freaking out last minute about essays is definitely the one thing I took from it. But another thing is, you know what? It's just the same thing. It's just being proactive. Yeah, that's the one thing I got from this is I'm just on top of everything that I need to be on top of, and with the activities that I do with ROTC, that's something that you have to have. It's not it's nice if you have this. It's you have to be proactive. You have to be ready to sit down, plan something, and be ready to do it in a short amount of time. And that's just how things are. And I definitely feel I got that through homeschooling and from Granite just because the workload was so intense.
I would say that one of the biggest skills that I learned was knowing when to speak and what to say. When I first came to Granite, actually visited, back then we only had third grade as the lowest we went, and I visited in second grade with my mom. And I had other friends who were visiting that day. It was an open house, but I was so shy and so this is a new environment, I don't know what to do, that I stuck by my mom's side the whole day, even though I had friends and I knew them and I knew what was going on. And that's not how I act anymore. I've grown up since then. And Granite really helped me to grow in that. Like through grammar stage, you learn this is what we're all going to be chanting right now, and so you all chant this together. And then in the logic stage, this is the topic that we're all going to be talking about. Let's all talk about this together. And by that time, we went from, my class at least, Candace and I's class, went from 24 kids in third grade to 8 in the logic phase to 3 in the rhetoric stage. And as we kept getting up and having these closer and tighter knit circles, we would have all of these discussions, right? We'd have, even in some of our history and omnibus classes, we would have, all right, so here's the topic, you guys gonna go research this, you guys go research this, you guys go research this, and come back and present it to the class, and you guys will present it, and then we'll have a discussion about what you've just presented in the next presentation. So you'll be teaching your peers, and we'll be talking about it the whole time. And even in figuring out, okay, so I'm researching this, and I need to figure out what needs to be said, and even like what background my peers need to hear this. Like I'm the first talker. Like they don't know any of the history that's coming from this. They need to get the context of this discussion. So figuring out the importance of what needs to be said and when and even how was really critical for me.
Yeah, there were some fun times had with that.
Oh, there were some fun times.
I found I had an anecdote with the whole like discussion thing. Discussions are very big, especially in high school. We have like what technically three class periods, and between each one we'd have like a coffee break. And usually the discussion we were having in class would always carry over into the coffee break, and we'd all be sitting right out there where the coffee is right now, continuing to discuss whatever moral topic we had been given and all expressing our opinions. So it kind of, we might have breaks in between class, but the class kind of doesn't stop because we are still discussing the same topics in our coffee breaks.
Just less formal.
Slightly less formal.
Shout out to Mrs. Patrat for letting that happen.
So I think really the greatest skills that I gained were kind of threefold. First, a serious work ethic. Secondly, a drive to maintain that work ethic. And thirdly, a desire to do hard things. This came in the form of really wanting to have an excellent senior thesis, to my friend telling me I couldn't build my own Linux distribution and saying, okay, watch me. And I guarantee you that was not the only time something like that happened. I could list for you dozens right now. So just having that drive to do hard things because they were hard, and because very few other people had done them, or because nobody had done them. That was just a thrill for me, and that was something that definitely came from Granite. That was not something that I was interested in before I went to Granite.
Yeah, pursuit of excellence for sure.
All right. So my last question for you guys this evening is there's a lot of parents and some students in this room who are thinking about whether they're going to homeschool or not through high school. So having done it, what are some things that you think are important factors to consider when making that decision?
I'm going to say, just off the top of my head here, start asking if they're in like 9th grade, 10th grade, what are you thinking about studying? Start that thinking early and not like senior year, like when they're starting to apply to colleges, because some colleges have better programs than others. And I didn't know that until I was applying to colleges. I mean, I knew what I wanted to do, so it was okay, and I ended up at 2 great schools, and just start trying to find out what your kids are interested in early. So like if they're interested in art, like Susanna was, they can start putting together a portfolio and getting the necessary help they need. If they're interested in science, get them into more advanced math classes at a local community college, because college math is hard. And the more credits you can build up before you go to a state school where the math program is terrible, the better it will be for them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there are degrees for everything these days. You know, my mom studied English, my dad studied math, and so they didn't even think about like the creative kind of degrees that you can get at colleges now. And so I think I wish I had been asked early on if I had any particular interest that I wanted to focus on during high school, because we just kind of did Granite and we did the Granite options, and so it was well-rounded and great. But I mean, I didn't get coding classes or art classes or things like that I guess I didn't even know I wanted them. I think I developed that interest later in high school. That's the tough part. But I think like that's the thing about being in high school is you're figuring out who you are and you're figuring out what you want to do. And so I think the best thing you can do as a parent is checking in with your kid about where they see themselves going and trying to empower them to be able to pursue those things earlier rather than later. So I'd agree with that.
Yeah, definitely start looking into extra classes or, asking about what they want to do as early as possible and just do a lot of like sort of extra credit stuff, go to a lot of museums just for fun and also because you get extra knowledge and it can help you figure out maybe this is something I'm interested in. But also transcripts, I think I want to say that my mom didn't start transcripts for Candace until junior or senior year, and that was,
She started earlier than
oh,
that.
she did? Okay. I've heard some people not starting them until about junior or senior year, and that's not fun because then you have to go through like a lot of like backlog of work from the past like 4 years and figure out what their grades were. So start that as soon as possible, just recording grades and being like, this is the first semester grade, this is second semester. I actually don't know what goes on transcripts because I wasn't involved in that process, but recording that information early on is probably a good idea.
Also keep that documentation.
Yeah, and getting that to whoever needs to sign it, the school board that needs to sign it, depending on, I guess, where you live, your district, or state.
And building on what some of them were saying, when you're finding out what your kids are interested in the way that you help them pursue it doesn't have to be inside of classes. When I took, the way I figured out that I was interested in computers was I took a cybersecurity class at Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab the summer of my freshman year going into my sophomore year. And one of the first things during that class, I really realized that this is something I have a passion for and this is something I'm really good at. And so, one of the first things I did with that is I built a computer. And so all of the stuff that I did with growing my knowledge in computers was outside of classes. I never really took a formal computer science class. But because I did so much on my own outside of classes, from setting up servers to whatever, I am leagues ahead of many of my classmates just because of hobbies I had at home. So don't limit yourself just to classes. There are tons of opportunities just on YouTube with projects you can do, watching people do stuff on YouTube and applying that. And then having that as a starting step for creativity, and then it will blossom from there.
I'm going to turn things and look a little bit more to the college side of things. And I'm going to tell you guys that as you're sending your kids to college and as you're getting ready to go to college, I'd suggest going to college with a full idea of what you want to study and why. Right? So I thought I knew what I wanted to do when I graduated, and there's a whole story there that I would love to share with you in further detail at another time. But I graduated thinking that I was going to be a nursing student. I'm not a nursing student. I'm a biology major, but I'm looking into teaching instead. And that teaching passion versus that nursing passion was really something that I found in my gap year. I took a gap year between high school and college, and I heard lots of people have said lots of different things, whether, I know someone else who's doing a gap year, and I'm like, well, it's not exactly the same thing. They're working at Starbucks and I'm working at a classical tutorial service, teaching, and finding out that I have fallen in love with teaching, and that's my passion. And maybe, I'm not going to say that falling in love with working at Starbucks isn't your thing, but maybe it's not. And so whether it's taking and exploring hobbies in high school, whether it's through classes or YouTube videos where you get to figure out how to solve a Rubik's Cube with the kind of problem, whatever you do, you can go to all these resources available to you. You have all of these college classes ready, the APL class that Caleb took, the community classes that I've taken. There's Khan Academy. If you're interested in anything, you can pursue that and take time to figure that out and figure out what you really want to do, and do that before college. Figure out what you're passionate about before college. And for me, that meant a gap year, and then going right back into being a student and falling in love with being a student all over again. Right? So take your time with that and be okay with maybe not going the traditional route. Maybe your non-traditional route is going to include an internship somewhere where you couldn't have that internship because it's during the school day. Maybe it's a work opportunity, or maybe it's a traveling opportunity that you get to have. Don't let the traditional school route be something that you want so much that it hinders you from what you could find and the passions you could discover.
And side note, I do suggest the summer cybersecurity class at APL to literally any and everybody. It is an incredible class. Sign your kids up for it. It's for high schoolers. It is phenomenal. It's called ethical hacking, I think. Go do it. It's incredible.
Granite, can you talk about your interaction with colleges on your gap year?
Sure. So, as a senior in high school, I applied to various different colleges, and then come May, sorry guys, don't want to go to you. Gonna take a gap year and do all these cool, fun things with my life. So during my gap year, while I was teaching here at Granite, I taught 2nd grade, all of the subjects, and 6th grade math. Oh my goodness, I learned a lot. But as I was reapplying to colleges after that, I was shifting my interests, right? So I had thought before that I was looking for nursing or like maybe English or history. So for one thing, the colleges that I was looking at totally changed because of the different programs and majors and specialties that they had. So after looking at the different programs that they had, only 2 of the colleges that I had applied to before I still was interested in. And of those 2, I reached out and said, hey, so at the beginning of the gap year, I said, hey, can I postpone this? Can I wait a year and then be accepted again? And some of them were like, yeah, sure, sounds great. Just keep us updated. We'd love to hear what you're doing, and we love students who have gap years. Tell us all about your adventures. And other schools said, yeah, I mean, it'll cost you $500 to do that, but sure, we can do that for you. And other colleges said, no, you have to entirely reapply. Turns out I ended up going to a college that I didn't apply to at all the first round. So that ended up being a huge blessing, realizing that St. Mary's has such a great education program, and being able to apply for that in the middle of the year. So if you have any other questions about gap years, please, or college or how that works, please feel free to ask.
An additional thing to think about, which might not apply to just high school, but kind of just homeschooling in general, is definitely think about your child's learning style, because a lot of people learn very differently. Some people are very hands-on, some people like to do a lot of reading, and don't be afraid to, if they have a specific interest, find ways to incorporate that into how they learn, okay, I had to take health, we all have to take health. I wasn't really into it, but there were a lot of things I got to do with it in terms of if I wanted to research a specific topic about maybe a disease or something that could affect me specifically or anything like that, mental health issues or whatever. I had the option to look at that as my health credit instead of just taking sort of the generic health course that most students have to take. And I got to do a lot of artistic projects to work on for other projects. I got to do a creative writing project for one of my omnibus classes, which I still have because it was a lot of fun. So thinking about maybe what your child is into, or even specifically how they learn, that's always something to take into account with homeschooling your child and doing those sorts of things.
That's another major advantage to keeping your child in Granite through the senior year, because the big final project, in case anyone's unaware of Granite in general, testing all of the skills you've learned for however long you've been there, is the senior thesis. And the great thing about it is it's not like they say, okay, here's a famous book, read the book and give me a large book report on this point of it. You get to choose what you want to do for the senior thesis. To an extent, you have to get approval from Miss Myers and Mrs. Petrata or whoever your teachers may be, but they're very flexible with you. They're very thoughtful about what you're trying to pursue, and so the senior thesis is just a very, it's unique, and I'd say it was definitely a blessing for me because I got to pursue a topic that I was very passionate about and I had a lot of interest in, and honestly, it wasn't as much work as it was just me having fun, frankly, because I enjoyed the writing, I enjoyed the research. The presentation was terrifying, but aside from that, senior thesis is a great thing, and it's definitely a reason I'm glad I stayed at Granite throughout all of it.
I think most people who do their senior thesis project, either it's a very big passion or hobby for them, or they end up pursuing it as like a career or in college later in life or from after high school. So the senior thesis thing is really big and also can be a really good thing because you also get the mentorship with that, where part of the senior thesis is for your project, you have to find a mentor of someone who is in that field that you are studying, and that's a really good way to start getting connections, especially if you're really into that area and you're going to study it. You're going to start getting connections with those people who will get you into jobs or even provide recommendations for colleges if you need to get to a specific college for that degree. So that's always an additional thing that is really good.
Also, as I mentioned before, thesis is a really great way to bring classical education, which is inherently not very technical, not huge on the sciences, and bring it into and focus it in something that is something that you care about. So I was very focused on computer science. So I chose my thesis topic as there's a gaping hole in internet security, and I intend to rectify that. So very technical topic, and I got to spend 8 months researching it instead of spending 8 months reading To Kill a Mockingbird. Not to bash To Kill a Mockingbird in any way. Sorry, Gabe.
Yeah. Actually, to add on to that, all of you except me did something science related, right? Wasn't there science in? I mean in our graduating class. Wasn't it something science related for all your theses? Yeah. So I mean, even though Granite is heavily focused on English and history, out of the 5 of my graduating class, I was the only one who did something that wasn't scientifically related. So it's still 100% feasible for you to pursue something scientific even in your final project. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you, panelists, so much. There was talk of transcripts and guidance counselors, and so as we close out, I thought I would just put some resources out there to you. One is that at Granite we have lots of resources that we've developed to help you as you're going through high school put together that transcript, make it look really nice and professional, have all the credits that you need, craft the program that's going to be right for your kid. And so those are available to you when you get to that high school time. And then the other resource that we have is you all parents who have done this before. If you've gotten a kid through high school and you're in this room, would you raise your hand? That is homeschoolers. So if you're new to that and you're thinking about doing this, those are the people to talk to. Community is really important to us at Granite, and so you all are each other's best resource. That support for each other and the experience that you all have. I can give you the list of everything you should have, and you can check all the boxes, but actually talking to someone who's done it is really helpful and encouraging. So definitely, if this is something you're considering, seek out those who have done that to talk to you about what that could actually be like from a parental perspective. Specifically, Kendall Morton has volunteered this year to sort of volunteer his time to sit down and talk with you. So if you're in that 7th, 8th, even 9th grade range, and you're looking at the high school program, what do you actually need to have? What classes do you need to find for your student? Get in touch with Kendall, get in touch with us, and we'll direct you to Kendall and connect you so that you can have that resource available.
Just so you all know, I'm a public school chemistry teacher. And so I teach juniors, and I see them go through this, and I encourage them in the process. And I talk to the guidance counselors. I consider it part of my job that I'm ready for college as much as I can. So I'm perfectly willing to give you whatever expertise I can for helping your kids to homeschool throughout.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you all for coming out tonight and for attending. We're really happy that you all wanted to come listen to these students, and thank you panelists once again for being here.